मेरा मेरा अपने जगह पे रुमाल रखा हुआ
A very good morning to all. I think we're all settled, and welcome to the first, fireside chat that we are having with a very distinguished and a power-packed panel at the India Engagement Center on the topic of artificial intelligence. It's a buzzword out there, and we're sitting at a revolution which is characterized by autonomy and speed, all powered by artificial intelligence. The Indian government has proposed to make India a very critical node in the global tech supply chain, and artificial intelligence will play a big role. We have with us a very diverse panel and looking at it from various different lenses. We have Nibruti Rai ma'am, who is the MD and CEO of Invest India. We have Mohammad Athar sir, who is a partner at PwC. We have Vivek Sharma, who is a researcher at MIT Media Lab. We have Sachin Dev Duggal, who is the CEO and founder of Builder.ai, and Professor Marcus, who is a renowned voice on artificial intelligence.
It's live.
Thank you all for joining in. And AI, there are a lot of questions that are going on in my mind. I'm sure there are a lot of questions out there for all of you joining us in person and as well as the audience online. So I'll try to squeeze it in. We have limited time, and I'll dive straight in. Professor Marcus, my first question to you. AI in Davos is right now a buzzword. No more remains an emerging tech. But what's the dilemma in regulating AI at this point of time, and what is your sense about it?
I think we're trying to balance innovation. AI has the potential to change the world for the good, revolutionize agriculture, revolutionize material science, revolutionize neuroscience, and so forth. But there's also a lot of downside risks. I think the biggest immediate one is misinformation in all the world's elections, including India and my country, the United States, and so forth, all around the world. It's very clear that large language models are very good at mimicking people, but they also have no idea what's actually true, and they have no sense of ethics, and that makes them wonderful for people who want to create misinformation. Cyber criminals are using them, and long-term risk is we're building technology we don't really understand, we don't control very well, and conceivably it could run out of control in various ways. I don't think the species is going to go extinct like some people talk about, but I think the possibility of real serious harm is true. And so we're trying to find a regulatory regime where we encourage safety, but we also allow innovation. That's the fundamental dilemma.
I'll pick on the last statement. Is a trust-based metric to evaluate AI possible?
Metrics in AI have been really hard. I mean, we have a lot of indexes that are reliable, but not many that are valid. So in psychology, for example, which is my original field, we'll talk about a metric like the IQ test. It's super reliable. If you have somebody take it 1 week and the next, their score will be pretty similar. But does it actually measure intelligence, the thing that you want? Not so clear. And so we have all of these measures going back to Turing of things we want to measure, but often, machines succeed for reasons other than what we care about. So the Turing test turns out to be a measure of human gullibility more than an actual measure of intelligence. You can fool people and pass the Turing test, but so what? So yeah, you can make a measure of trust, or like there's truth QA, which is a measure of whether or not systems are telling the truth. But these things have never been really getting at what we want. Building metrics is hard. We should be building metrics around trust. That should be fundamental. We want to have certification procedures, for example. Is this piece of software reliable? But doing that is really non-trivial. It's not something that AI researchers, I think, on their own are all that qualified to do. We actually need people who understand things like psychometrics from the cognitive psychology field to be involved in that. So it's hard, it's going to take money. I hope people will put the money into it. It's not something you can dash off in an hour.
I'll come back to you. Sachin, coming to you, innovation and regulation will both accelerate in the times ahead. What's in store for AI in 2024?
Look, I think it's really important to understand where we are from a time sequence perspective. If you remember, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, AOL launched the disk, and then everyone thought, oh my god, the internet is here. But actually, the internet was here 30 years before. Last November, OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and we suddenly thought AI was born, but actually it has been for about 30 years. And I think the key is we're in the dial-up world still. And the reason I say that is, let's imagine like some of the complexities. Imagine you wanted to teach a child in New Delhi and London about British independence.
Yeah.
We know that sovereignty is based on culture. Culture is based on history.
Yeah.
History has no single definition of the truth, to the earlier point. And if you have a model that's built on the idea of volume being an authority, well, which version of history is the truth? You can't have a single model. And so I think what you're going to start to see is we go from dial-up to broadband, and that analogy plays out. You're actually going to see massive changes in the tech stack.
Yeah.
From an LLM perspective, I think you're going to move towards multimodal. And I'll give you another example. Imagine a childhood memory of you playing cricket.
Yeah.
You see the video in your mind. Well, that's a knowledge graph. You didn't generate that.
Yeah.
If I said to you, could you help me complete my sentence? What do you think I'm going to, the word you're thinking of is say or do. Well, that's a graph neural network. We haven't touched generative yet. If we then said, let's make a picture about this or a poem about this, there are known entities here that have known graph backgrounds, but we're now generating within a constraint. And so I think it's important to understand the human equivalence. And so these technologies, as you think about 24, they're still going to be around which human can I put a cape on to make them a superhero, not about which human can I replace, or which job can I replace.
So coming back to the point of LLMs as such, contextualizing LLMs, right now LLMs are typically defined on the set of data that is coming in from the Western world. But as far as the global South and the cultural sensitivities that are there, what are the challenges in making an LLM that is more scalable for the global South, I would say?
Yeah, so I think firstly, I push back. I don't think they're just trained on data in the US. But I think you've hit a really important point, which is, for example, if you ask ChatGPT, what do you use turmeric or haldi for? In someone in California, the answer they're thinking is I put it into a latte. Someone in India puts it into a curry, and someone in Vietnam uses it as a healing bandage. And so that goes down to not necessarily how you train the LLMs, but how do you create contextual relevance in the question, right? And so I think that's actually technology that's yet to be built. Because I think what you've got right now is I call it like the hard fork. So the UAE is built Falcon LLM. Right. We're seeing many nation states build their own. I understand that India has a sort of a desire to build its own LLM. I call these hard forks. The reason they're hard forks is at some point English is English.
Yeah. And
we're sitting and retraining on common data sets, which is hugely inefficient from an energy perspective. To give you an example, next year, all of the NVIDIA chipsets in the world will use the same amount of energy as Sri Lanka, just to train data.
Yeah.
So it blows your mind, right? And so I think what you're going to start to see is cascading models, where you have multiple LLMs that are able to cross-communicate and then produce a net effect outcome. Right? But we're in research stages of what that looks like.
Right. Coming to you, Vivek, when you come in from the world of research, how do you see increasing the R&D output as far as AI is concerned, and especially in India? What are you doing about that?
So my impression about India is that we are a growing economy, and the efforts that we are putting in India is already amazing. The efforts of Invest India or Making India or other efforts from Niti Aayog or National AI Portal, and there's many more things we are doing. So I would double down on health tech because I went to Harvard Medical School as well. And my impression is that India has a population of 1.4 billion approximately, and we have this insane amount of data. And the type of omics and all the types of data sets that we are collecting, India would become like the powerhouse of healthcare because we have insane data. And if we could connect all these ties together and build like a longitudinal data sets and things, then it could have a huge impact. And it doesn't stop there because AI in healthcare is one topic, then you have telemedicine, then you have virtually health assistants, then you have this personalized medicine. So there's so many topics, but something that interests me a lot is AI in radiology. And radiology has you have ophthalmology, then you have cardiology, and then you have diabetic retinopathy, and then you have so many use cases. And in the states at least, this is all class 2 problem.
Yeah.
What that means is that it does not replace a doctor, rather than a doctor gets complemented. Like you have rural India, right? We do not have services there yet. We don't even have I don't know if you have MRI scanning villages. Because even in the States, the numbers are approximately 20,000 MRI scans for the whole United States and 100,000 approximately for CT scanners. I don't know the exact numbers for India. So India is definitely working towards it. And what happens in rural areas, it's important in emergency settings as well. So there's a lot of interesting, impactful things that we can work on. And again, we are a growing economy. We can build things. Okay, regulation is a very important thing that we are working towards, and connecting all these things, coming with data collection or data pooling techniques so that people are much more open about it. And together, building a technological integration is very important, because we could keep on building a technological thing, but if we did not interface with the healthcare system and with the government, these things will never tie together. So we have to build an interface such that the startups which are coming out can actually plays an important role and could easily be integrated with the healthcare system, rather than they are decoupled.
Building an ecosystem remains very
Yeah,
important.
yeah, and that's where major revolution could take place, and we could become a major powerhouse for India from the healthcare standpoint, because we have the liberty.
Absolutely. You talked about a lot of use cases, and I'll take it up.
Yes.
So you advise businesses on a very daily basis. What are the kind of use cases that you see in India are taking a lot of traction as far as AI is concerned?
So it's a huge area. It's working. Hello. The AI role as well. Hello. So there are multiple use cases. A couple of years back, we wrote a global paper on AI opportunities, and we said by 2030, AI itself will have a $15.7 trillion impact on global GDP. And we identified 300 use cases under which there could be an application. What we are seeing in India, especially, there's a huge focus on the manufacturing productivity improvement leveraging AI. Because India is doing at a very large scale very simple manufacturing. Think about a lot of assembly manufacturing, where we have been traditionally having reviews of the product quality through very mature eyes of people. So think about a glass bottle conveyor belt, and people are reviewing whether the glass bottle is aligned or not. And there are several defects that end up coming over there. And using a simple 360-degree sensor camera, you can avoid your data, and you can see the convergence on the sizing and all. And then that's a very simple use case where that journey has started happening. So we are seeing a lot of action across supply chain in manufacturing, across transport and logistics. For example, what's happening, AI data can be really leveraged for a lot of efficient route planning, sourcing decision. And a lot of our transport and logistics clients are now trying to leverage this to say, can we bring down our costs? So for example, traditionally, there's been a lot of focus on infrastructure when we were working on the quality of infra, but now in leveraging AI, we are thinking about how we can be more efficient in terms of the overall planning and leverage, sweating our assets much better. So let me put it like that. It's one interesting thing, we are even seeing, use cases, and which is very interesting to communities like us. We are consulting, so generative AI is now even being used. So, we are telling our guys that, look, forget about PowerPoints now. So our clients we're working with one of the investment promotion agencies outside India. We are taking 30 seconds with the help of generative AI to give out a whole, project report to an investor. So what we do is the investor comes and they say, we want to have a 10-year view on the market, what is the competition, where will it go, what is the policy, and then there are multiple data sources on which the bot works, and then in 30 seconds by the end of the meeting, the whole project report will be the investor. So that's the kind of use cases that started from.
Ma'am, you come in from the world of corporate, and now you are a very established hand inside the government. What is your take on AI adoption in the sense of the government lens?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to do government lens and private lens also, because we are both private and public. I just wanted to, add to something that I heard from you, Sachin. I think you said, AI has been happening for the last 30 years. But what has happened now, since I come from my ex-company was Intel, I must tell you this, that in the year 2000, to do genome sequencing, it literally took billions of dollars. Now, you can do it in your palm of a hand for $100, $200. That's the compute power that has improved. The other thing I can tell you is, over the last 5 years, battery cost has gone down to 90%. Now this is the context that I'm setting with. Now let me give you 2 examples, and you'll say, what the hell I'm talking about? But let me first describe your human body. Human body is made of only 20 amino acids. Okay? Those 20 amino acids combine, and you will know better than me, but combine to make some 800,000 proteins. By the way, insulin is a protein, hormone is a protein. So there are 800,000 proteins that those amino acids make, and some of the amino acids you actually eat and inject from outside, and rest your body makes. Now you have 800,000 proteins, they combine to make about 3.7 trillion cells inside your body. Now those 3.7 trillion cells combine to make 8 tissues. Those 8 tissues work together to make organs, heart, liver, and all of that. Now that's a human body. Honestly, when we look at treatment, even for a disease like tuberculosis, which is perfectly curable, do you know that we get quite generic medicine for tuberculosis? Even though there are many, many strains of tuberculosis. Ideally, if a technology like AI was to be leveraged for a human body, and remember, I have 3.7 trillion cells inside me. And even if you're talking about, taking the vaccine, which was an RNA vaccine, there is, cell therapy that we are working on. There is, genome sequencing to try to address issues through your RNA, DNA. Imagine the number of complexity that we have to deal with 8 billion people in the world, each having 3.7 trillion cells, each living in a different environment, each eating different kind of food. If we don't use technologies like AI, we will not be able to come up with a truly personalized medication that each one of us deserves. Second thing, by the time this session gets over, which is roughly an hour, 17 deaths because of road accidents would have happened in India. Now, if I were to use AI-based mechanism to avoid such accidents, it's absolutely worth it. So I know every generation of technology comes, you think about, what wrong will it do? I'll tell you from coal. There were economists who said, let's not make coal, because if you start making coal, people will unnecessarily use coal, and that's not a good use of energy. Then the Luddites against mechanization. So many, and there were people who were arguing about, let's not make washing machines. So think of what AI can do. Now let me answer the question. I firmly believe with the deepfakes and all, and by the way, the reason I can speak this is because in Intel, I actually worked on an inference engine, architected it, not the training, but the inference engine. So I understand what it takes to do those computations. I will tell you how cancer works. Cancer cells are there in your body, but when they start increasing very quickly, what they do is they create a way of getting food from another cell. Similarly, when you think of, you use Snapchat and all of those applications, you start seeing how you age. You move, you start. They're using technology called GAN, Generative Adversarial Network. There are technologies that you're using, like cancer uses to create cells. I'm saying there are technologies that can be used within AI to counter those AI. So as Investimia, we are working on a regulatory framework. It's a very early effort, and we are partnering with countries and companies. There's no way we can solve this problem alone. There's humongous amount of effort that goes in, and we have come up with a simple way to showcase to the actual doers, which are the companies and the countries, that there is this possible solution, just to tell them that we are thinking enough, but we need help from multiple countries coming together. This is a very complex problem, but why do I believe we can do it? It's just compare your artificial intelligence to natural intelligence. How many thugs do you see? How many killers, how many wrongdoers do you see? There are human beings who can be categorized as moral and immoral. To differentiate, to punish, to see the impact of their wrongdoings. What have we done for natural intelligence? We have a judiciary, we have police, we have so many different things. I truly believe if the minds of the people come together, we will build a framework which allows people to use AI for the good and try the best to avoid AI to be used for the bad. It's not going to be easy, but having managed a very large organization within Intel, I can tell you, if me as a manager comes up with a problem, I know the smart people will figure out, the super smart professors that we have will figure out a way. And I'll tell you, us as a small Invest India team have come up with a way which is not very done. Because we spoke to the Microsoft and the Googles and they're saying, oh, you guys are thinking tops down. We were thinking bottoms up. So, there are ways and we will. It's not going to be easy. No technology innovation is easy, but we will come up with regulatory framework across countries, across companies to safeguard the interest of human beings while creating value for us. So that's what I believe. And why India plays a big role. We are custodians of 20% of humanity data. If we don't stand up to be the founding members to drive this regulatory framework, we are not being, sincere to the 20% of the humanity that we house in India. And with the 20%, I really love what you said. The amount of data we have, if we figure out, there are technologies like homomorphic encryption, federated learning, which enables innovation without actually sharing or taking away somebody's privacy. So I am very confident that the smart people of the world, if they can solve for ozone, they can solve for so many other, I'm 100% sure global warming will be addressed. I'm sure this group of people will figure out a way.
On that note, I'll take that question back to Professor Marcus. So Marcus, you were amongst the many signatories that called for pausing the development post GPT-4. What in your sense made you write that letter? And if you could elaborate on the kind of risks associated with uncontrolled AI, is that something that we need to worry? I mean, there is a sense of complete excitement across the globe, and obviously a mini globe is here in Davos, but there's also a palpable worry. So what made you write it?
So I didn't write it, is the first thing that
You
I should
signed
say.
it.
I did sign it and I helped popularize it. I put out a tweet on Twitter that got like 7 million views. And so a lot of people confuse that tweet with authorship. I didn't write it. There are problems with the letter. It's not a perfect letter, but I signed it because I wanted to raise awareness for how serious the risks are. And I thought the letter was reasonably careful about not going overboard. And a lot of people misinterpreted the letter as calling for a ban on AI altogether. And the letter absolutely did not do that. The letter called for a ban on only one thing, which was models of the size of GPT-5. And the theory was, we don't know how to make them safe because we don't even know how to make GPT-4 safe. You look at all the guardrails, they don't really work, they're permeable and so forth. And the letter actually called for more research in AI. It's just that the research that it called for was research into safety, into AI safety. How do you make these things trustworthy, reliable, safe, and so forth? So the first part of my answer would be, I signed the letter because it encouraged more research on safety, and I think we need that. And then in the media, it got turned into we're calling for an absolute ban on AI. I don't think that would be a good idea. I think there are potential benefits. We should not shut it down. You could argue about deployment, which is something I had actually written about just before that letter. The argument I made was that we should have restrictions on deployment of large scale. So if you're going to deploy something to 100 million people, you should have to undergo some kind of safety testing. You should have to show that the benefits outweigh the risks. OpenAI released their safety report and they said we could destroy democracy, we could blow up mankind, all these kinds of things. Pretty serious. And then they said, but we're going to release it anyway. And if you compare that to like an FDA process, like you have to say this drug is gonna save more people than it's gonna kill, that's not an unreasonable request. And they just blew it off. They're like, yeah, we know it's really bad. And by the way, we're not even gonna tell you how the model works or what data is inside. So it's up to you, society, to deal with whatever next negative externalities we create. I think that's ridiculous. I think that there should be some kind of certification or pre-approval process. But I don't think we should shut down research. I think it should be more geared towards very large scale deployments. Another way to think about it is a large scale deployment like that actually affects everybody, the entire planet. So even if only 100 million people sign up, everybody else is affected. So like if there are negative consequences towards elections, I didn't sign up for GPT-4 or other people use it for misinformation, then I'm in this big experiment about what kind of society we're going to have when large language models are unregulated, even though I didn't consent to that, and that's a problem. I forget the second piece of the question, but maybe.
How well, I'll take that up with actually Sachin. Sachin, in terms of, like what you talked about, the risk, Builder AI is that kind of platform where, you allow anybody to develop a certain different app. That's one of the features that's out there. Tomorrow, if I want to build, like, say, an Amazon.com website or maybe an app, the idea of plagiarism is always there. How do you stop? What do you say to like an Amazon, which says that you're giving an opportunity to plagiarize my content or not my content, but my idea in terms of developing something similar?
Well, I'd argue Flipkart already did that.
Right.
So I think plagiarism, being inspired, and the vernacular that people who don't understand technology talk in are three very different things. Plagiarism is copying something exactly word perfect, and then not giving a citation to the original source. So probably more in the realms of music, academia, writing a PhD dissertation. I think when you get to inference or inspiration, I'm sure you've read a book.
Yeah.
And when you were studying, I'm sure you wrote an essay on the book. So therefore you violated copyright, right?
Not really, because that was my own sentences.
Right, but you got inspired by what you read. You didn't come up with the laws of thermodynamics. You didn't invent E equals MC squared. Right, and then I think you've got, how does a common person talk about what they want to do?
Right.
So when a common person talks about what they want to do, they use generalized public references.
Right.
So building an app like the New York Times, like being the imperative word, building an app like Amazon, building an app like Flipkart, I'm telling you, that conversation is already happening in consulting companies the world over when they're speaking to business people. All we've done is institutionalize it, which is, we know that's how people talk because no one talks in words that are nondescript. And the key though is, we haven't gone in and stolen Amazon's code or Flipkart's code and said, here you are, this is the original Amazon.com code. If you want to build something that lets you sell online, well, I mean, there's like 5 billion businesses that are probably selling online just in India.
But in terms of building an ecosystem, I'll just take off that. What do you have to suggest to the Indian policymakers in terms of developing a robust AI ecosystem?
I think building a robust AI ecosystem, AI is the tip of the glacier, right? And often what you know, the tip of the glacier is the thing, is only a very small portion. It's what's under the water that's bigger, right? And so you got to think about cloud regulation. We completely missed the ball on that one.
Right.
You have to think about social media regulation, right? So we all get very nervous around misinformation, for example, or deepfakes. But Val Kilmer's voice in Maverick is a deep fake because he's lost his voice. But yes, the Pope wearing a bomber jacket is a bad use of a deep fake. But it's not the AI that's the problem, it's the dissemination method of where it's being computed. And we've not regulated those two things. I think the second is it's more like a wider governance around software. You can't wake up one morning, for example, and say, we're going to stop all payment gateways bringing on new customers.
Yeah.
It seems really mundane, but tomorrow you could start saying, we're not going to allow anyone to run an LLM model, right? Well, that level of instability is a huge issue if you're trying to innovate, because we're laying ground for a year or 2 years or 3 years, not for tomorrow.
Coming to the point of healthcare and data in India, data per se for a robust AI requires it to be in a very structured, formal manner. We have historical data, but the context of that data to be utilized is a challenge. How do you see overcoming that? As far as the data set is concerned, India has a huge data set, but actually use it, it's quite a challenge.
Well, it's not, it's a general problem to everyone, right? You need to know what you're trying to achieve with your given data sets. So my assumption is, although these are all my personal views, just to be correct. So I think that we have all this type of data sets which are collected, curated, maintained. They might be disorganized, but as you can see that generative methods, you don't really have to, you can just do some kind of reconstruction learning, and you can learn a nice representation out of it. So many things could, like some basic representations could be learned, and together with that in self-supervised learning and things, you can actually refine that and further annotate your data sets if you want. There's an insane amount of work that we have in research which can actually help us. But I totally understand that collecting this kind of data set, which can all be tied together, and we could do something, so there has to be some big efforts, not from the Ministry of India, but it has to be more public sector, like each individual has to also support it. And they could be rewarded for this in some kind of initiative, or like, I don't know, there are many ways how you could do that. And likewise from the public sector also, like government, companies and individuals can contribute to that. And that's where most of the research that is happening, because you can participate in some programs, that you can participate in that. And I certainly things I heard that in UK they are somehow collecting this longitudinal data sets, and which are all patients from UK, right? And I think so that's the same things that we can borrow from what the European countries or in the US, what they have approached and how we can do that. And likewise, I would add something, because we are talking a lot about privacy here, right? So we spoke about federated learning. So there is also an alternative method called split learning that came out of the MIT Media Lab from our group. And that is a more scalable approach, because most of these privacy-based mechanisms you cannot train on device. But what you actually need is some kind of systems which can obfuscate the representation, suppress a certain amount of information. When you send it out to the server, that's where the different kind of inversion attacks or some mechanisms are applied, and you can invert it. And you can get to know what was the patient or what their technique or what their data were.
Right.
So there are many methods that we have developed as well. Together we also, for privacy sensing techniques that we have launched from our group, that was also during the pandemic, we founded this PathCheck Foundation from our group. And those privacy sensing techniques were actually for contact tracing was deployed in 8 states in the United States. And also with India, we partnered, and in few states that was also being deployed. So there's a lot of conversation we can also have together, because from the MIT standpoint, from our group, Camera Culture Group, we could certainly have this conversation. And where we could even partner from privacy standpoint, because there's a lot of room. And certainly I think data collection, it is like a much bigger question, and it has to be much more centralized, and everyone has to think it through. And regulated frameworks again, because regulated framework is not for computers, it's for humans. And if we basically have the right consent, how we want to operate on it, then things make sense.
Right. So I'll come to you, sir. As a matter of fact, in terms of infrastructure, in India, it's actually a very labor-intensive sector. And with AI coming in, there's a lot of fear as far as job losses are concerned. What do you think? Like, I'll divide this question in two halves. Like, is that risk real? And secondly, like, what are the jobs of the future so that it can be offset?
See, when we did this paper, we saw that, and I talked about that $15 trillion opportunity. Clearly, 40% of that opportunity is coming from new products, better products, and 60% of that is efficiency gain. So clearly, there is an added advantage when we are thinking about leveraging AI. For example, I'll give you a couple of use cases where we are seeing in infrastructure, there is a massive opportunity for growth, and then that will have a significant impact on new employment that will get created. Think about contract management and contract enforcement in India. Now, India at a large scale is building roads, dams, irrigation projects. Now, where's the data layer on that? And think about at the core, very few infrastructure companies delivering tons of contracts over there, and then they're not really aware about what's happening in which region and how can we generate efficiency. And then there's a lot of labor workforce that is there, both formal and informal across this. And based on the progress on infrastructure projects, how do I move my labor, which is right now, the two locations, two project sites are not talking to each other. And now what we are trying to do is to say, how can we leverage AI to create predictability on future employment across projects as the projects are progressing, and then hence moving this workforce, because workforce in India comes from very limited region in India, and large scale, contract companies, infrastructure developers have struggled, and there have been project delays because of that. So we are rather seeing that with AI, there's more, possibility of creating predictability on project progress, and then building a workforce profile for that. So that's, clearly, that's a, added advantage. Second, for example, if you see within the largest space of electric mobility, for example, now electric mobility is seen as a big opportunity in our country. Now, what we are doing right now in India is we are still using buses with batteries. The battery swapping is a great opportunity, and leverage with AI. We can have swapping stations where you can have bots in 30 seconds. You could move. You can open it for more bus operations. That generates more mobility, more public mobility, which is accessible. And on those swapping stations, there will be more new types of opportunity that will be created to say that along with the bot, if the bot is not working, who's there to manage it manually? And then there will be, I would say co-creation along with AI, where AI will add efficiency, will increase, create new types of infrastructure development opportunities. And we can keep on going on right from planning to, whatever is happening on tender management itself. So we are right now very bullish to say there will be efficiency gain, but at the same time, there will be new opportunities that will get created. And in the efficiency gains, you will see people will get more predictable employment, and that will really impact, especially the informal workforce which we had in our country, which really gets impacted based on whatever real estate or infrastructure development we do.
The fact that India intends to be a global AI hub and a major node in the global tech supply chain. We just hosted the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence GPI Summit. As a policymaker now, how do you sense the ecosystem evolving? And also my second part to this question would be that what's your vision for attracting investments into AI R&D inside India?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your second question first. How are we attracting investments into India with AI? So I'll tell you that when I look at the complete AI leverage end to end, the part of developing AI is a very small part. First is collect the data, annotate and contextualize the data, leverage the data for training, leverage the data for inferencing. Comes out information that you have to use analytics. Based on the analytics, there's decision making or information. So in this entire cycle, I truly believe that India, with its workforce, so I'll tell you, I feel India is synonymous to software, and India is synonymous to its population of 1.4 billion people, which translates into data. So if you have software, and if you have data, and you have a whole lot of people, who can be trained to collect data, they don't need to even understand English, as long as they understand, which button to press. Once they see that, I really feel why jobs will be lost. I am in no way or shape denying that there will be job losses, but more jobs will be created. And we have to be ready to upskill the people for that. Even people working, jobs that are unstructured, we can train them for many of these things that I talked to you, which is outside. So I really feel that India, with its software, India with its sciences and technology, and India with its data, is going to be catapulting based on AI. I really feel AI is the shoulder that India will stand on and jump. And what was the first question?
First question technically was on GPAI and how.
Policy.
Yeah.
I think that is the most crucial thing that we must address. I fully believe that we have to safeguard our citizens, we have to safeguard our data. But honestly, can I tell you how much of your data is already available in the air? How much of triangulation is already happening? That's why the solution that me and you included, the team came up with is tops down. There are already apps that have to be watched out. So I'm not gonna give you the technology behind it because that's, still a work in progress. But I can tell you that with that technology, we can look at any app. I'm saying if it is collecting data, if it's analyzing data, if it's giving information out of the data, it's AI. And if this is an app, then it needs to be certified based on certain rules, red, yellow, green, or whatever you can choose. When you go to a movie based on content, you say it's an adult, or you say it's, whatever teen classification. So every app, even existing apps, need to be monitored, and the framework has to address new AI apps and existing apps to be able to, safeguard our human beings' interests. So that's what we are working towards. And like I'm going to say it again and again, the solution lies in collaboration, the solution lies in partnership, the solution lies in innovation. I'm really happy about, what I heard from you, what my team has developed. So far, we were using federated learning, but I'm very happy to use split learning and see, how I can share data without actually moving data. So federated learning, you can imagine, is like the smallest model we are moving rather than data, but the challenges, I know what we were experiencing. The last thing I want to say, tomorrow's world is going to be based on trust. I have been saying that since I came to Davos here, that it's not going to be a function of geographical distance. It's going to be a function of how much trust you have. And we have to work with trusted countries which have similar vision, democratic vision for humanity, large scale, population scale good, and drive this problem to figure out the solution.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'll open it up for questions to our esteemed panelists from the audience. It will stay on time, so a quick couple of them, if all any. Yeah, you want me?
I was just gonna say, I can only take one or two.
Anyone?
Question
Right
for
there.
Gary.
Question for Gary. Or for anyone.
Hi, my name is Sunil Desai. I'm from Institute Associates, a law firm based in Mumbai. My question is that, with AI and whether you take blockchain, AI and all of that, the way we perceive the idea of trust is going to change drastically, and the cost of, you have systems which will have trust as a main, even the whole theme is around trust this year at World Economic Forum. So how is this trust, how is the quality of trust and the quantity of trust, right? So there's going to be this battle between, the model of trust itself is going to be questioned. And how do you perceive trust in the era of complete decentralization and, and the geopolitics around it, because each country has its own geopolitical perspective. So how do you perceive this idea of trust taking a whole new, systemic change?
I'll just say one thing before I have to dart off, which is that given all the misinformation, the natural tendency is going to be for nobody to trust anything, and that's not actually in itself good, and we need to be careful about that. We don't want a society in which nobody trusts anything. So we need a more subtle response than just be skeptical of everything. We do need to be skeptical, but we somehow have to find a way to maintain trust in the coming era. Sorry, I have to go.
Thanks, Ray.
I'll just say 3 words for you, and I practiced this in my lifetime. Trust but verify. You go to take trains and you buy tickets. It's an honor system, but don't think that there's nobody watching. Just the trust but verify, and I completely agree with Professor. We have to have some amount of trust. But then, with my life, I use trust but verify.
So there was a really interesting book by Yuval Harari called Homo Sapiens. And sort of around the middle of the book, he said, human beings have about 10,000 thoughts we would never share with another human being. Our conscious mind blocks it. The issue you have is, veracity and trust are sort of 2 eggs of a seesaw. On one hand, you want to have something that can answer questions. The second issue you actually have is human beings, when they talk to a machine, they behave differently. compared to when they talk to another human. And it's because of the emotional feedback, the other 4 signs of communication that you don't have with ChatGPT. And that is a problem to be solved. I don't think we have an answer. I don't think it's easy to answer it in one line. I think we have to figure out how you have this sort of symbiotic relationship where a machine can give you answers, yet it doesn't yet have the value system that a human does.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jose Jacob. I'm from Bangalore. We see that in Europe, after the GDPR model, which is lock, stock, and barrel data into boxes. In India, we have something called DEPA, Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, and which we might see some interesting use cases in Bangalore. We started with that Namma Y3, an auto rickshaw app, which is based on backend protocol, so it's a decentralized system. And suddenly now, the data of the auto drivers for the last 200 days can be given on a link to a bank. So if this auto driver, who's at the vulnerable part of society, wants a loan or a credit, he can get it, and he gets the OTP that he gives to the bank to use an AI model to check how much loan can he get. My question is so we are diverging into 2 parts, right? One is data empowerment and using data for empowerment, and the other is kind of data fines and people getting sued for data breaches. Is there a middle path between these 2? That's the question.
I think there has to be. I'm a big believer that ambient data, especially if it's originated by things that you do or passive data, is extremely powerful. But extend that model out, right? So now the bank's giving you a loan. Therefore, the bank is giving you a credit score.
Correct.
Now that credit score belongs to the bank.
Correct.
No longer belongs to you.
Correct.
So if I get enough data points about you, even though I don't have the origination data, I can actually figure out it's you.
Okay.
And so the fusion here is not A or B. I think we have to get comfortable in a world that there is enough compute that can take any salted data and effectively unsalt it. We just need to be comfortable with that, because at this point you could give any amount of NHS data, any data from the government of India on medical records, and I could identify you probably in a day, because I could run enough computation on it. There's something unique about all of your different salted properties, right? Maybe you have a birthmark, maybe you have something else. I could effectively triangulate and I know it's you to a high degree of probability.
One final question before we wrap up.
Yeah, so maybe I want to add something to this point. So even if you want that, right? So the big question is that we have to come up with better standards or regulations that we could find a middle ground. That's the whole EU AI Act or any other act, that the Biden's act that came out, and all this conversation. So how can we find a middle ground? And the question is also that this kind of credit scoring or anything, I think it's not the end, it's the beginning. And it has started, I don't know, maybe a few years back, but it is only going to propagate more. But I think so it has to be used wisely, and that's where the whole point of regulatory acts and where government has to play roles, because it's very important that people who do not have the right resources, so certainly you spoke about the credit scoring, right? If you do not have a profile, how do you get a credit score? You do not. At least in the States, you can't. So you can't even have a credit card if you don't have a credit score. Finish. So it takes a couple of months before you build a profile, then you can have a score. And that it's like a cycle. It's like it's a deadlock. Where do you start and where do you end? And it's like, so, and it goes round to round, and therefore it's important that right conversations be open, and at least India could have like a different perspective towards it, and we could come up with different strategies around it.
Just one thing to add to that, and I think the EU covered this in search, and I'd extend this. There needs to be a human right to make a mistake, and there needs to be a human right to be forgotten.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that becomes a central thesis for how you implement.
One final question.
Yeah, hi, this is Tapiq. I represent Xconnect. There are 2 things. I really agree with your point of view. We have, working on something which is related to collecting a lot of data from farmers, and we have now something called agriculture credit score, where you do not need any socioeconomic data. If we have the parcel data, we can actually give you the value of the parcel as to what is being, this thing. So that is also one of the things that that actually concerns, and this is something which is actually being developed and done by different state governments also. So what comes down to here is, don't you think, the question is, should we not have a department or a ministry of artificial intelligence now? Because I think this is the time, because I tell you, we are like 4 agencies working for the same system, and we are developing different AI models, and we are talking into 4 different languages, right? And we are working on the same data sets, I tell you. So who certifies who's correct and who's wrong?
So I could add something and then I can pass it on. So at least India, so I heard that many IITs are being opened, right? So each IIT has been assigned to start AI labs. So certainly, like, if, I don't know the number of IITs we have now in India, but
17 plus.
17 plus. So if you have that number of AI labs, so certainly one could actually combine all of this at least with some other institutions, and at least from academic standpoint, people could be elected. And likewise, when you talk about this, I do not know if like at least in the States, you have Department of Defense and you have so many different departments.
Yeah.
They do not come under the same umbrella. So they have to be one designatory responsible unit for each different department, and then one could combine it and one could have build something on top. But I do not see that now and not in future, that transportation and healthcare plus all different departments could just share their data, because if somewhere the leakage happens, everything is gone straight away. And where do you start?
Actually, on that point, Naveen, I wanted to add, and ma'am can of course take the formal government position. We'll have to see whether we want to think about AI as a horizontal or a vertical, because AI's use cases will come across various line ministries. And then, for example, you're focused on agri-tech, so whether the agriculture industry takes or the ministry takes a lead on those use cases and enables other sector guys to come together. So that's where the earlier point, it's about how you build consensus, build trust, get a set of ecosystem players work together. Because as I said, manufacturing, transport, infrastructure, we will have multiple use cases, and then we will start struggling to say that this line ministry is much more deep on the issues versus a specific line ministry. So, maybe a horizontal ministry which has embedded AI focus is what we will need.
Firstly, I like your idea of AI ministry, and for the very simple reasons that if you look at AI, there are only 2 kinds of use cases: people that build AI and people that use AI. Just imagine how many are using AI. Tomorrow, I have been saying this for the last 4 or 5 years. Tomorrow, you will be using AI without knowing it, like you use Excel. Everybody uses Excel and spreadsheet. Every single one will be using AI. So if every single one will be using AI, I think the onus is to have like a standard structure, like we have this finance ministry, because you have to pay taxes, you have to pay income tax, sales tax, all of that. So similarly, AI ministry, because all of you will be using it. Now there will be few people who will be building it. For the builders of AI, you need a policy and regulatory framework. That could be like you have, regulatory framework that comes from RBI or comes from SEBI. So there will be an AI regulation. But because you're using it, everybody is using it, I really believe AI has to have a horizontal ministry. The use cases are for all of us. And I don't know if I answered all your questions, but that's what I wanted to say.
So look, I think what's unique about AI, so you look at the prison service, the people running the prisons, the academic researchers, the government, the civil service, there's very little information asymmetry. The problem you have in AI is there's an acute information asymmetry. So the governments I've seen do this really well, as we operate globally, is actually the UAE. So His Excellency Omar Al-Lama, for example, who's the Minister of AI. Number one, it runs as an ink as opposed to an elected office. And so that means there's stability between whoever may be running. And so I think you need an independent department. It almost needs to be different from government because it needs to go past the next election cycle, right? I think that the second piece in this is the use will be prolific It'll be like, it's a utility. But I think that governance needs a combination of both academics, scientists, folks from literature. It's a polymath problem, not a STEM problem.
The user and the developers. All of them.
On that note, I think we should end, and thank you all for joining in, and thank you for panelists for joining. Thank you so much.
Don't